The Delhi Sultanate, the Golden Tiger, and the Jeweled Peacock. For more than 3 centuries a powerful sultanate emerged from the strategically located city of Delhi, which controlled the choke point between the Ganges and the Indus River valley systems. At the height of its power, the Delhi Sultanate nearly conquered the entire Indian subcontinent, covering most of the territories of modern-day India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. Before we dig deep into this topic, please subscribe to my channel and don't forget to press the bell icon. Please give your feedback by commenting, liking it, and sharing. The Sultanate defeated the massive Mongol Empire's attempts to annex India, and it became a refuge for those fleeing the Mongols. The origins of this fabulously wealthy and powerful sultanate were far different from the heights to which it rose to. The founders of the dynasty that established the Sultanate were neither the sons of kings, clerics, great warriors nor wealthy merchants, but instead they were born into a social class where their birthright was less than nothing. In fact, they were bought and sold multiple times. Some lost their freedom when they were sold by their own family members in the latter half of the 12th century. While kings, emperors and warlords determined the course of nations, a seemingly insignificant event was unfolding in an East Persian town. A young Turkestan boy, Mohammad Ghori, was from a long line of aristocratic brutal warriors from what is now Afghanistan, and what was extremely unusual for the time. They ruled alongside each other as joint sultans for 30 years periodically. The sultans gave gifts to those enslaved at the palace who did well in their performance review. The new guy Qutb-ud-Din Aybak's work performance impressed the sultan. Consequently, he received some lavish gifts. Then Aybak did something unusual. He distributed his gifts among all the other servants who had not received anything. The sultan was so impressed that he gave Aybak something he could not give away: a promotion to some sort of supervisor, and then later to the master of the stables. Their being able to read and write came in handy, and he was promoted to logistics manager for the Sultan's cavalry. Mohammad Ghori campaigned against Qurm in Central Asia. The Aybak was captured and placed in an iron cage to slowly die after successfully campaigning in the region. The Sultan saw Aybak rotting in the cage. The pitiful sight greatly moved the Sultan. After Aybak was released, he was given promotion and gifts which he probably gave away. Aybak thrived in every job. He was promoted up to the rank of general after conquering the Indus Valley. The following year they returned with a new army that had a much larger cavalry contingent. The Gurds used hit-and-run fleeing retreat tactics en masse against the Rajput, who were unpracticed countering that tactic. This led to a resounding grid victory, with the Rajput defeated. Little formed resistance stood in the Gurds' way. In only a few years they conquered most of the northern Indian subcontinent, and then in nearly all fell apart even quicker. Mohammad Ghori was slain under mysterious circumstances with way too many suspects and literally medieval forensic investigative techniques. Nearly everyone decided to blame everyone else, and the whole empire fell into civil war with multiple factions vying for supremacy. Consequently, Delhi began to expand rapidly. Aybak finally established internal peace, prosperity and stability in his new empire. He decided to do something fun and relaxing like playing polo. Then he fell off his horse and died, sold for a few coins. Early in life, Aybak died at the age of 60 with absolute control over a vast empire populated by millions of people. During his life he was so famously generous that for the next 4 centuries in that region, calling somebody an Aybak of that time was a common compliment for a generous person. Aybak had no apparent successor, so the generals, officers and nobles in Lahore did the democratic thing and voted for the most popular among them to be crowned the Sultan. A man named Aram Shah won the vote, and a peaceful transition lasted not much longer than about 5 minutes. The problem was almost nobody outside of the corrupt old city of Lahore like Aram Shah. The governors of the Bengal rebelled. The rest of the military officers and nobles backed Aybak's son-in-law Ilish Iltutmish was probably not declared his heir, probably because Aybak thought he still might possibly have a newborn son. Iltutmish defeated the elected sultan, and then the rebel governors. Iltutmish had a very similar origin story to Aybak. When he was young, his own brothers, who were jealous that he was not only very intelligent but also very good-looking, sold him to traveling merchants. After that he was bought and sold multiple times and ended up being known by Aybak. Under Aybak's tutelage, Iltutmish rose through the ranks in the greed and succeeding Delhi Sultanate. He became considered as Aybak's son, and later, near the time of Aybak's sudden death, he was freed and married one of Aybak's daughters. During Iltutmish's reign, he officially moved the Sultanate's capital from Lahore to Delhi, which began transforming into a grand imperial capital city. As Iltutmish expanded the Sultanate's territory in the north, the Mongol horde overran Delhi's newly built neighborhoods. With them they brought knowledge and as much wealth as they could possibly haul away from their destroyed homelands. By the end of 25-year reign, the city of Delhi had transformed into a cultural, intellectual and economic hub. Old Iltutmish realized he had one big problem: all his sons were a bunch of pleasure-loving, lazy losers. He hadn't been much of a father to any of his surviving sons, as he spent all the time. He could train his eldest son to succeed him, and when his eldest son died, he didn't like the backup options. On the other hand, he had a daughter named Razia who had previously effectively affected the city of Delhi for a year while her father was campaigning against rebels. So, he made the highly unorthodox decision by naming his daughter Razia as his successor. 5 years passed, and shortly before Iltutmish died, he summoned one of his sons to Delhi and declared him his heir. The new Sultan Rukn-ud-Din was an instant disaster when not blinding or killing family members and military officers. He enjoyed riding his elephant while drunk through bazaars while scattering gold coins on the ground, and he left most of the empire's administration to his mother after 6 months of Rudn-ud-Din carnival of death. His sister Razia heard she was about to be executed, so she came up with a risky plan. She attended a large congressional prayer and incited the crowd of commoners to storm the palace and capture Rukn-ud-Din's mommy. The plan worked, and most of the soldiers in Delhi joined the rioting commoners. Hearing the news, Rukn-ud-Din, who was trying to put down a revolt elsewhere, hurried back to Delhi with his army, where he was quickly captured and executed. After putting down a few rebellions, the empire's nobles and military officers accepted Razia as a sultana. However, they expected her to be a puppet ruler, and she was not. She put her name on coins, rode about on her elephant at public state events like her father, and appointed her loyalists to all the top positions. Eventually this was too much for most of the officers and nobles. So, they rebelled, deposed, and replaced her with another one of her brothers. When the Mongols raided the Sultanate, he was either too scared or indecisive to attack them. The ruling council of 40 chiefs deposed him and replaced him with one of Iltutmish's grandsons. Eventually, like his aunt Razia, he mistakenly thought he was a real sultan. So they had him eliminated too. Then they put another of Iltutmish's sons on the throne, and finally on the 5th try they got the puppet they were looking for. He had a long and uneventful reign, while a former Mamluk that had belonged to Elmish named Balban rolled from behind the throne after the last of Iltutmish's heirs died without leaving an heir. Balban assumed the throne. During his long reign he stabilized the empire, recaptured lost territory, and successfully fought off Mongol incursions. Balban's grandson succeeded him to the throne, while the young ruler spent his time on wine and women. Jalal-den, a warlord from an Afghan tribe of Turkic origin, guarded the empire's border from the Mongols. Jalal-den knew the Mongols well, as he had been a warlord in Mongol service previously for many years, and then he was hired by the Delhi Sultanate to guard their border after successfully fending off the Mongols and seeing the weak and decadent court in Delhi. Jalal-den organized a palace coup which succeeded loud and usurped power with shedding relatively little blood. The 70-year-old sultan had spent a lifetime fighting for or against the Mongols, and then he defeated them again as sultan despite a lifetime spent as a warrior in the most brutal of conditions. Jalal-den had a reputation as being mild-mannered, humble, and kind towards even the lowliest of peasants. His nephew Aladdin did not have this reputation. He had his uncle killed and usurped the throne. Although Den was a talented military commander and administrator during his reign, the largest ever Mongol invasion of India was defeated afterwards with the rules reversed. He ordered the regular raids of the Mongol Chagatai Kate. Aladdin proceeded to go on a cavalcade of brutal conquests in the subcontinent against the Rajput and southern kingdoms of the Den. Because of his vast conquests, he stylized himself as the second Alexander on his coins. Through plunder and effective economic management, Aladdin presided over a booming and well-run economy. He also effectively used cruelty, intimidation and massacres to keep his empire's frightened subjects in line. After he died at about the age of 50 from either sickness or the assassin's blade, nobody was kept in line. The empire plunged into a series of palace coups and civil war that lasted 4 years. This chaos was ended by a provincial governor. Tughlak claimed his dynasty was of Sassanate Persian descent, but numerous historians have doubted the connection. He was definitely an experienced commander who, like the founder of the Key dynasty, had gained his experience fighting the Mongols. Like Jalal-din, Tughlak also defeated a Mongol invasion after becoming sultan. He then proceeded to conquer Bengal in the east. After returning from his conquests, he died instantly and unexpectedly in a wooden pavilion he was standing. Nan collapsed, it killed him and one of his sons. Some suspected sabotage. His son Muhammad bin Tughlak oversaw the heightened power of the Delhi Sultanate, and he squandered it. The Sultan fancied himself a great intellectual and was constantly reading and studying. He also didn't take anyone else's advice. He was later known as the Mad Sultan, the eccentric prince, or the wisest fool. He thought outside of the box in expensive and wasteful ways. He forcibly moved the capital city's population from Delhi far to the south and then changed his mind after a few years and had everyone moved back up north. He also raised a gigantic army, 375,000 men strong, and paid them in advance to do nothing and then disbanded them later. He raised another large army and marched it into the Himalayan mountains with the goal of conquering China, but in reality he couldn't even contend with the local kingdoms, the cold and the starvation. After 100,000 men died, he turned around and went home due to his rampant mismanagement. By the end of his reign, widespread famine and revolt were endemic throughout the empire. His successor had a long and competent reign where much of the damage was undone. Then the empire fell into infighting and civil war. This was when the Turk-Mongol warlord Tamerlane invaded. He laid waste to hundreds of thousands and sacked the capital city of Delhi. The timid army sacked Delhi for 15 days and then returned with their loot to summon. The Tughlak dynasty collapsed soon afterwards. The following Side dynasty was a pale shadow of the former glory of the Delhi Sultanate. After a few decades, the weak Side dynasty was overthrown by the Lodi dynasty of Turco-Afghan origin. Compared to its predecessors, the Lodi dynasty was incredibly stable with only 3 sultans in 75 years. They expanded their territory in the east while losing a little in the west, and they moved the capital south to the newly founded city of Agra after a long period of relative stability and generally competent rule. The Mughals, who claimed descent from Genghis Khan and Tamerlane, invaded the Indian subcontinent. The Delhi Sultanate was able to field a larger army which had a massive contingent of 1,000 war elephants. The Mughals had no elephants, but the Mughals brought handheld firearms and cannons. During the battle, the sound of the cannon terrified the elephants. They became disoriented and rampaged through the ranks of their own army. Ibrahim Khan Lodi, the 31st and final sultan of the Delhi Sultanate, died in battle alongside 20,000 of his troops at Panipat. The Mughals went on to conquer most of the Indian subcontinent during the centuries of Mughals' dominance and decline. The Muslim Mughals emperors used the city of Delhi as their capital city for 230 years after the eventual fall of the Mughals. To this day, Delhi remains an important global center for politics, economics and culture, and with more than 30 million people living in its urban area, it is one of the most populated cities on the planet. Thank you for watching.